Hoy nos sumergimos en un documento que plantea una pregunta incómoda. ¿Qué ocurre cuando un país posee enormes recursos estratégicos, pero tiene capacidades limitadas para controlar efectivamente su territorio marítimo? Bienvenidos a un nuevo Deep Dive de Strategic Labs. Recuerden que tienen los links originales en la descripción.
It is quite the question, isn't it?
It really is. So welcome everyone to today's deep dive. Today we are exploring the geopolitical reality of the Blue Pampa, which is, the
Yeah.
Argentine Sea.
Right.
And we're looking at just a massive stack of sources today, everything from naval defense data to satellite imagery and even classic geopolitical theories.
Yeah, because we're trying to understand how the South Atlantic has transformed. It used to be this quiet periphery, right? But now it's one of the most fiercely contested economic and logistical frontiers on Earth.
Exactly. So I want you, the listener, to imagine something for a second. Imagine looking at a map of a country, right? And suddenly realizing you're only seeing half the story. You are completely ignoring this massive underwater territory that essentially dictates the future of food, energy, and global power.
And that's exactly what we're talking about today. This deep dive isn't just about fish or boats, though they are a big part of it. It's really about the clash between nominal sovereignty, which is basically what a map says, and real control, which is what a country can actually defend.
Right, because those are two very different things.
Very different.
Let's start with this incredible image from the NASA and Kone satellite telemetry. It's wild. You're looking at the edge of Patagonia, dead of night, exactly 201 miles off the coast. And there's this sprawling city of lights.
Yeah, visible from space.
Completely visible from low Earth orbit. It looks like Las Vegas just floated out into the ocean. But obviously it's not a city.
No, not at all. It's hundreds of foreign ships. They are operating right at the absolute mathematical edge of Argentina's exclusive economic zone, or the EEZ, literally at the 21st mile.
Which is just crazy to think about. And it contrasts so sharply with Argentina's historical strategic identity, right? I mean, they've always looked inland.
Right, the Pampas.
Yeah, the agricultural plains.
Yeah.
Or more recently, like Vaca Muerta for shale, oil, and gas.
Yeah.
They have this massive maritime platform, and they've just kind of ignored it.
Well, it's what we call in strategy a land bias. It's a real psychological and political hurdle. Public and politicians, they easily grasp land borders, a mountain range, a river.
So you can put a fence there.
Exactly. But a maritime border is fluid. It's opaque. It's much harder to conceptualize, let alone defend.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like having a sprawling estate with a massive vault of gold in the backyard, but you only ever look out the front window.
That is the perfect analogy.
But is this just a unique Argentine blind spot, or is this like sea blindness, a common geopolitical vulnerability?
Oh, it's incredibly common, especially for nations with huge terrestrial resources. If your land feeds your population and generates wealth, projecting power into a freezing, volatile ocean, it drops down the priority list. But ignoring it now in the 21st century is a massive vulnerability.
Right, which brings us to the old school naval theorists. People like Alfred Thayer Mahan, Nicholas Spikeman, Alfred Mackinder. I mean, Mahan's whole thesis was that sea power defines trade, influence, military capacity.
The whole international projection of a state.
Right. But, I mean, how do 19th century naval theories apply to a bunch of fishing trawlers today? Like Mahan was talking about dreadnoughts and cannons.
Yeah, well, the application of his theory has completely mutated. In the 19th century, sea power meant colonial routes and sinking the enemy's armada.
Sure.
Today, sea power means controlling logistics chains. It means controlling food supplies, offshore energy, seabed minerals, polar corridors.
So it's not about cannons anymore.
No, influence today is economic extraction and logistical dominance. A sovereign navy might have cannons, but if a foreign fleet can operate continuously for 2 years in a contested zone, extracting thousands of tons of resources, well, they functionally hold the sea power.
Wait, really? Just by being there and extracting?
Absolutely. Endurance is power in the maritime domain.
And the South Atlantic is becoming central to all this, right? Because of changing climates and global alliances.
Exactly. Traditional routes like the Suez or Panama canals are facing huge issues: geopolitical instability, climate-driven drought. The South Atlantic is this massive, unobstructed Superhighway. It's suddenly way more valuable than it was 50 years ago.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about the resources themselves. Because Argentina is trying to rebrand this space as the Pampa Azul, the Blue Pampa.
Yes, trying to make the ocean as culturally and economically significant as the Green Pampa.
Right. And we're talking about massive, massive wealth here. The fishing grounds are some of the richest on Earth. Squid, the ilex, Argentina's hake, shrimp.
And we need to be clear, this isn't, a couple of guys in a rowboat.
No.
This is industrial-scale protein extraction. It equals foreign exchange jobs and global food security.
I mean, think about the sheer economic weight of a squid catch on a global industrial scale. With population growth and climate change threatening land-based agriculture, controlling protein from the sea is a massive hard power weapon.
Right. And then beneath the fish, you have hydrocarbons.
Oh, yeah.
There's huge offshore exploration happening in the Argentine North Basin, the Austral Basin, areas near the Malvinas or Falklands.
And even deeper than that, looking to the future, you have seabed minerals, polymetallic nodules.
Exactly. The transition to a post-carbon economy needs a ton of rare earth elements, and the seabed is where they are.
Okay, so you have this unbelievable treasure trove. But that brings us right back to Mile 201, the gray zone and the dark fleets.
Yeah, this is where the mechanics get really fascinating and legally very complex.
So, our sources identify fleets linked to several nations operating here. Specifically, they mention fleets linked to China, Spain, South Korea, and Taiwan.
Yes, and we should note, we're just reporting what the sources have identified regarding these actors.
Again, we're totally impartial here, just looking at the data. But the tactics they use are wild. We're talking about IUU fishing, illegal, unreported, and unregulated.
And opaque transshipments.
Right. Can you explain the transshipment thing? Because that blew my mind.
Sure. So these distant water fleets can't afford to sail all the way home to unload. So they offload their catch onto massive refrigerated cargo ships called reefers right out in the open ocean.
It's like a floating warehouse.
Exactly. And it hides the origin of the catch. They mix legally caught fish from Mile 201 with illegally caught fish from inside the EEZ.
So it's basically a laundering operation.
Basically, yes. And to make it worse, they turn off their AIS, their automatic identification system.
Which are supposed to be for collision avoidance.
Right, but turning it off makes them a dark fleet.
But wait, this is what I don't get. It's like they're putting on these digital invisibility cloaks. But if we can see them from space using SAR satellites, synthetic aperture radar, why is it so hard to just stop them?
Because seeing a blip on a screen in Buenos Aires is very different from physically arresting a 60-meter steel vessel in the Furious 50s.
The Furious 50s being the really rough latitudes.
Right. It's a logistical nightmare. To patrol millions of square kilometers, you need constant satellite feeds, surveillance planes, Coast Guard cutters, deep naval logistics.
It's cost a fortune.
An absolute fortune. You have to sail a ship out there in brutal weather, launch a small boat, board a hostile vessel. It's incredibly dangerous and expensive. And the fleets know this. They exploit this gray zone.
A gray zone. So it's aggressive and economically damaging, but it stays just below the threshold of, like, military conflict.
Exactly. Or blatant international law violations. They sit right on the line.
Man. Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting.
Antarctica.
Yes. The fish in the oil. That's just the warm-up. The real geopolitical prize is further south.
It always is.
And Argentina has a massive geographic advantage here, right? They have the bases, the territorial claims, the historical logistics. Ushuaia is literally the gateway.
It is. And we really need to unpack the future of Antarctica. Right now, the Antarctic Treaty freezes territorial claims and limits militarization.
That's the 1959 treaty.
Yes. But these nations, they're playing a 50-year chess game. The Madrid Protocol, which bans mining, could be reviewed in 2048.
Which sounds far away, but in geopolitics, that's tomorrow.
Exactly. Antarctica is the future node for global science, completely untapped resources, and polar routes as the ice melts.
So the core thesis is whoever controls the southern maritime logistics and ports today will have the strategic advantage tomorrow.
Precisely. If you build the deepwater ports and the icebreakers now, you hold the keys in 2048.
But there is a massive complication for Argentina's ability to operate in its own backyard. And we have to talk about the military factor of the Malvinas, or the Falkland Islands.
We do. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it changes the entire strategic map.
And again, we're laying this out completely impartially based on the geopolitical realities for both sides.
Right. From the UK perspective, the islands represent immense military projection. It gives them logistical capacity, air and sea control, a global presence, and crucial austral and polar access.
It's an anchor for them in the South Atlantic.
Exactly. But for Argentina, it represents a claim of sovereignty and national identity. And practically speaking, it's a massive strategic limitation to their own maritime control.
Because it's an overlapping resource claim.
Hmm.
I mean, how does this military reality actually complicate things for Argentina?
Well, imagine trying to patrol that 201st mile and project power down to Antarctica, but right in the middle of your logistical bridge is an immovable geopolitical wedge, an advanced military presence.
Right, it fractures their operational space.
Completely. It divides their focus and their already stretched resources.
Which segues perfectly into this huge gap between law and reality, between sovereignty and capacity. Because Argentina recently had this massive legal victory, right, in Atlanta, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea.
Yes, the Convimor. The UN partially recognized their extended continental shelf.
Which is huge.
Yes.
It legally gives them rights to the seabed way beyond the 200 miles.
Legally, yes. It's a diplomatic masterclass.
But then you contract that with the material reality. They have aging fleets, a severe lack of oceanic control capacity, budget discontinuity.
And insufficient maritime infrastructure. This is the brutal rule of maritime geopolitics. The sea that is not controlled is gradually lost as an effective space of sovereignty.
So what does this all mean? I mean, does a piece of paper from the UN actually matter if you don't have a boat in the water to back it up?
That's the million-dollar question. Legal claims don't eliminate disputes. They only give you a framework to argue them in court. If you lack the physical presence, the paper is functionally useless against a foreign industrial fleet that is actively extracting resources. They won't stop because of a UN resolution. They stop because a patrol vessel forces them to.
Wow. It's wild that this isn't front-page news every day, which actually brings up a huge point from the sources.
Yeah.
The media blind spot. Why is this massive issue so invisible?
Well, because the sea is invisible politically. You and I don't see it on our morning commute. The threat is gradual. It's not explosive.
That's a slow burn.
Exactly. The costs are diffuse, so citizens don't feel the daily impact, which means politicians aren't pressured to act on it immediately.
Makes sense. Okay, so where does this lead? The sources outline 3 future scenarios for the South Atlantic. Let's walk through them. Scenario 1, passive continuity.
This is the baseline. Argentina's capacity stays limited, foreign actors continue to exploit the gray zone, and there's just a gradual, continuous erosion of Argentine influence.
Basically, a slow-motion loss of the territory.
Right.
Okay, scenario 2, strategic reevaluation.
This is the optimistic pivot. Modernization of the Navy, expanding satellite tech, building up those austral ports in Patagonia. It leads to much greater negotiating power and real control capacity.
But this raises an important question.
It does. This raises an important question. Can developing nations afford scenario 2? Modern frigates and continuous air patrols cost billions.
Yeah, that's a tough sell in a difficult economy, which leads to scenario 3, global intensification.
This is the most volatile. Crises in global food and resources make the South Atlantic so competitive that it draws heavy, persistent foreign military and economic presence.
So it just becomes a free-for-all among the superpowers.
Essentially, yes. The coastal state gets sidelined by bigger geopolitical actors because they couldn't hold the space.
Man, that is a heavy thought to end on. But I want to leave you, the listener, with something else to mull over, something we haven't explicitly discussed but builds on all of this.
Oh, I like this. What is it?
Well, think about this. If the 21st century is truly defined by who controls the oceans, rather than who controls the land, we might need to completely redraw our mental maps of the world.
Yeah.
What if the most powerful nations of tomorrow aren't the ones with the largest land masses, but those with the most impenetrable supply chains and maritime corridors?
It changes everything about how we view power.
Exactly. The map is blue, not green. Llegamos al final de este extenso análisis. Si les sumó valor, compartan y suscríbanse a Strategic Labs. Hasta la próxima.